Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman, and I am your host. And this is part 2 of an interview with Mark Crawford, who is the State Director of SNAP, Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests. Welcome back.
Yes, thank you, Natasha.
So I'd like to start out, we talked in the first half about your story of being a survivor of sexual abuse by a priest and kind of the impact of that and what that does to a person. And in this half hour, I'd like to talk a little bit more about kind of the world at large and what's happening, because you're doing a lot of work uncovering, trying to change the law,
Yes.
changing laws. So let's start with the law that you actually got changed.
Sure. Well, when I first approached the church about my abuse, and I was seeking a pastoral response. It wasn't about money. I wasn't seeking money. But I had told the bishop years earlier, and they did nothing. They put him right back in my parish. They told me to stay away from him. He would stay away from me. That didn't happen, of course. And then he was eventually elevated, became the Archbishop's personal secretary. So I kind of knew they didn't get it. I had seen a picture of him surrounded by children at Christmas time. And this is after they knew, after I had spoken and met with the Archbishop. And I was really, really upset. But again, when I had approached them, their response was, look, the statute of limitations has expired. You're not going to get anywhere. And in New Jersey, we have charitable immunity. So I was like, well, what's charitable immunity? What are you talking about? And it turns out, in the state of New Jersey, one of just a few states at the time that had that law, it gave an ironclad immunity to nonprofit organizations, even in cases where they played a role in the sexual molestation of a child. I mean, that's just preposterous. But yet nobody knew about this law that came about in 1958.
Other than the church.
Other than the church, exactly. My understanding is they're the ones who asked for it back in 1958, and it became part of a New Jersey law to protect nonprofit institutions. But it was meant to insulate them from frivolous lawsuits, maybe a slip or a trip or a fall. Never could it have been intended to protect an organization from gross misconduct, particularly in allowing or playing a role in the sexual abuse of a minor. So I was like, wow, that can't be. That's crazy. How can we have such a law and nobody know about it? So I began an effort to have that repealed so that any child who comes forward later in life, and we know that's often the case, if ever at all, that they would not be barred from getting to court based on charitable immunity. It was always what prevented them from moving forward in a civil case and having their day in court or exposing their perpetrator. Because certainly the church wasn't doing it. They weren't out there telling us, when they knew who.
In a way, you could almost understand their arrogant behavior when you came forward knowing that they had this law to back them up.
It's like holding all the cards.
Yes.
You have nowhere to turn. Back then, you couldn't even find an attorney to take your case. And it just wouldn't happen because legally you didn't have a leg to stand on. So I had gone to my local state legislator, Senator Joe Vitale, and asked him to sponsor a bill that would eliminate this immunity. And it took more than 6 years, almost 7 years, of a real battle. And of course, the church opposed it, and another local institution, the American Boy Choir School here in Princeton. The school had a horrendous history of sexual abuse of children years ago. And one of the alumni had come forward and began to uncover all the horrendous cases of abuse at the school. So they were the only two entities in the state that really opposed this legislation moving forward. And it took some 7 years and a lot of hard work.
I'm going to interrupt you here
Sure.
because you could see that they have a vested interest, but just from a public relations point of view, what was their leg to stand on? What were they saying that would oppose this?
Well, I originally heard that this would be unfair to change the law now in the middle of the game. And I
In
thought
the
that was
middle
so...
of the
game, yeah. I
Right.
said, look, this is not a game. Are you kidding me? And you have to keep in mind, okay, while it might appear unfair at first, you have to remember it was the church leadership that kept most often, these cases quiet from coming forward or reporting them to authorities. In my case, under state law, when I told the bishop he was required to report this to local authorities, he never did. So of course they
So
knew.
that is a criminal act in and of itself, yes?
Well, it's in New Jersey. It wasn't a criminal statute, but it incurred a civil penalty of, I believe, $500. I'm not sure that's ever been levied against anyone in this state, but at the time, that's what the law had stipulated. So there was really no penalty for not reporting it, and that's what they did. They just did not, and they waited, and they knew most often when the statute of limitations expires. Even the predators understand this when they're free. And how is it that you think a predator could have 100 or 150 victims? That's not unheard of. We have had many clergy here in New Jersey with numerous victims. And
you said that New Jersey became the dumping ground for pedophile
Well-
priests because this law was in place?
well, certainly we had immunity. And as I started looking into it and researching clergy who had been accused in New Jersey, very often I was finding that they were transferred here from outside the state, time and time again. In fact, the parish in which I live right now, at one time there were 3 men in the past, recent past, who had been accused of abusing minors. 2 of them were not even from New Jersey originally. And that's a recurring thing. It continues to come up. So it made it easy. In fact, the Philadelphia grand jury report highlighted a case where the priest was originally from New Jersey, had eventually had abused children here, but was transferred to Philadelphia, where he had abused, and it became known. And the first thing the bishop did was to transfer him back to New Jersey and Cape May County.
Charitable immunity.
Oh, well, without a doubt, it certainly appears that way to me. Again, you know, let's just keep that protected. And they often shuffled them elsewhere where maybe the local media, you know, it was known. We can't put them back in this diocese. So they often transferred them. I know of cases where where the priests, after their conviction, actually changed their names and then were placed back in ministry elsewhere and returned to abusing children. I know people might find it hard that these things have happened, without a doubt. And it's shocking. It's absolutely unacceptable. For those who know better, it's one thing. But for the leaders of this institution, not to disclose that or not to say, no, you cannot do that, is unfathomable.
Truthfully, that's exactly what it is, because it's not even rational. There's no rational explanation that you could come up with that would make sense. It's just hard to wrap your mind around it and figure out what is it they were actually thinking. That it's okay, that it's not such a terrible thing. What were they protecting? That self-protection was more important than these human beings who they presumably represented?
Without a doubt, Natasha, you hit the nail on the head. Self-preservation. The interests of the institution were always put first before, forget the child. And often, even in court documents, they never spoke of the harm that came to these children. It was always about, oh, this might lead to a lawsuit. Oh, the public may come to know and there will be scandal. It will harm the church. Never was it, what has it done to this child? What about the harm done to this child? And that, an overwhelming reoccurring theme. I can't think of a case where they acted because the interest of the child, to protect the child. It just didn't happen.
And again, for an institution that presumably is about you know, elevating the human being, and the way to do that and to get closer to God,
Right.
and then to behave in such abominable ways.
Well, you would think after 2002, after the massive revelations in this country, that they would learn from the public demand, the public outcry, and that they would change. But the fact is, that is not the case. Although some new processes, procedures have been put in place where they deal with all the laity, the parishioners who participate in the parish community. They've required some fingerprinting, maybe on occasion do some background checks, okay, or require background checks. That's true. That's not always the case for the clergy. And in fact, there were several cases highlighted recently in the Star Ledger newspaper regarding clergy the Archbishop knew about and either allowed back into ministry or tried to transfer them after they were known to have abused other individuals. And it's truly sad and sickening. And during Dallas, the charter after 2002 that came out, they promised more transparency and to be open. But in fact, in these cases, they didn't tell the parish community until after SNAP or myself, along with other survivors, held a press conference revealing that information. And why does it take the survivor, the citizen, the parishioner, to come forward and force the church to act in what it should have done from the get-go? That's unacceptable.
And you know, if they were a corporation and, you know...
They are a corporation.
Well, they are. But if they were like a regular secular company...
Yes. I'd like to share something with you, because even, albeit maybe for the simple fact that they don't want to get sued, even corporate America has learned how to handle such situations better than our church does, sadly to say. But that's a fact. In many cases, and not all, I mean, we have companies that have learned the hard way, but they have been held accountable. And there was an ability to hold them accountable.
Yes.
But here in this state, they had immunity. So there was no such impetus to enforce, albeit for the wrong reason, the proper action on behalf of those who watched over our children in our church.
So tell me, after 6 or 7 years, and thank God for people like you and your commitment, what was the law that was passed? Because it didn't eliminate
no, it didn't.
Immunity overall.
Correct. It was a very narrow revision, only applying to the sexual molestation of children. So if a child was abused, a minor was abused, no institution would be able to use charitable immunity as a defense. And that was eliminated going back.
And the church fought that, and again, how could you believe in an institution that would fight against that? I mean, I don't get it.
No, most people wouldn't. I don't get it either, other than it says two things. You know, we're looking to protect and cover our assets, and quite honestly, when these cases do get to court, they may want you to believe it's about the money that's paid out. Often that's paid out by insurers or insurance companies. But it's not. It's oftentimes about the documents that sometimes get disclosed or revealed during discovery, which show that very often, all too often, there was previous warnings about the misbehaviors or sexually acting out of these clergy members with earlier children.
And that's what they don't want.
No.
Now tell me about this
Absolutely
priest who
not.
was sent to the Canary Islands.
Father Thomas Doyle, a Dominican psychologist, was very prominent early on in the church. He worked at the Vatican Embassy and did a report along with another individual. He was involved with the very first public disclosures of clergy abuse down in Louisiana. And they began to delve into it and try and unwrap what has been really covered up. And they did a great job, and they produced this extensive report that was supposed to be presented to the bishops. But that report got deep-sixed, and it effectively ended the career of Father Thomas Doyle, who, as I said, had worked at the Vatican Embassy in Washington, D.C. A real insider, someone on the fast track. But you know what? He believed that the truth had to be told, and he is one of the most outspoken critics, and thank God for Father Tom, that's all I can say. Without a doubt, he truly espouses his faith and what it's about to stand up there and say, look, there's other issues here that we need to deal with. And it's the clericalist culture within our church that doesn't exist in other churches. It's the structure where we, as you mentioned earlier, kind of the mystique, the ability to hold the priest above others. And it becomes, I can see how very good that is, maybe for the child who's idealistic and you know, we want to look up to something. We have to have heroes. That's important. But there's a point where that becomes unhealthy, that idealism. And when we do not hold them to the same standards we expect from the rest of society.
You know, it's interesting because I was thinking, as you were talking, of, you know, all those church scandals in the past, these preachers on television, not necessarily the Catholic Church, who, you know, were messing around and stealing money and everything else, and they came back and people still sent them money. So I think for me, it's like, well, what is going on? And I suspect, first of all, it's hard to admit that you've been putting all your faith, and we want to have faith, and we want to have people take care of us and tell us that they're going to save us, whatever. But it's so hard for us to admit that we maybe made a mistake and have to start thinking differently.
I think for most people, and you made a very good point there, Natasha, that brought to mind, to clearly help separate, and it's definitely a tenet of the Catholic Church, forgiveness, okay? It's one thing to forgive. We can always know, acknowledge, and forgive, and we should do that. I totally agree. Forgiveness and forgiving is important. None of us are perfect. But that said, that doesn't mean we should not hold people accountable.
Yes, it's just like you see people in, you know, going to prison and forgiving the person who killed their, but they still need to be in prison.
As we raise our children, do we not do the same? If a child does something we tell them, no, you should not do, is wrong.
Right.
There is the explanation, which they don't always get, and they're going to test you, right? But then finally, you put your foot down, and there's some form of repercussion. There are consequences for your actions. And without that, what do we learn? That it's okay, because I'm not going to be held accountable. I can push that limit. It's okay. And I think that's an enabling society, and I think we don't do it wittingly, but unwittingly, where it's so much easier to believe the minister or the priest or the coach
and then
or
they
the
play
doctor.
the forgiveness card,
Sure,
which you know, can be very powerful because people want to, you know, feel like they have an open heart, but you still have to hold them accountable.
When we fail to publicly acknowledge or support any victim that comes forward, all we're doing is ensuring the isolation and silence of other victims. It is a horrible after effect which must stop. And it's the one thing our church continues to do. I'll give you an example. Just recently, a survivor, a victim of clergy abuse, had come forward. He was suing the Diocese of Minneapolis, okay? Not for any money amount, not for a single penny, but simply for the files to be revealed of all those who had been credibly accused within the diocese. That was his lawsuit. His lawsuit was set aside on a technicality. The statute of limitations had run. So it doesn't mean there was no merit. It doesn't mean he wasn't abused. It simply means that the church is being protected based on a time, an arbitrary
Didn't the
time
third
frame.
church go after him and try to get him to pay money?
Exactly. They turned around and sued him for $64,000 to recover that. Actually, the dollar amount was $128,000. They later, in reports, increased that amount. They went after him to recover the money. Now, let me say this. Although to most of us that dollar amount may be significant, I certainly don't believe it is for the Diocese of Minneapolis. But look, no one wants to have to pay unnecessarily legal claims. But the priest he had accused had already been credibly accused of abusing many other children.
And it's just that the time limit had passed.
Right. It's simply that the statute of limitations had expired. So there can be, in my mind, no other reason than to take that action than to discourage other survivors from stepping forward. And that is, I cannot express enough that's exactly the outrageous, unchristian behavior that instead of setting the standard and taking the higher road, turning the other cheek, as we're often told to do, even in the gospel. How is it that they can justify turning around and going after this man other than
Making
to
a point.
scare other victims and make that point?
So let's talk about the statute of limitations. I never have quite understood
Sure.
that. You're guilty until, as long as if you get away with it long enough, you're not guilty.
Right. Well, exactly. It doesn't mean it didn't occur. What it means, it was put in place to protect certain crimes. Now, murder is considered so serious in every state. There's no statute of limitations on murder. But there are on lesser crimes. And I can understand that. And these laws were put in place many, many years ago at the founding of our country, okay? We had some of these laws, and over the years they've developed.
Is
That
it a
said,
state-by-state thing?
It is.
Okay.
It is. It varies state by state. So it's very important to check with your local prosecutor or go online, go to your state house website and look up. Make sure you understand the crime, though. It depends on the
But
particular
the statute of
crime.
limitations in New Jersey against sexual offenders still is in existence.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And
Now,
what's the number of years?
well, let me, Natasha, I need to clarify
Okay,
that
good.
because there's a difference. There's civil and criminal law, okay? Now, criminal statute of limitations, there's a much higher burden of proof. It has to be beyond a reasonable doubt, okay? In New Jersey, in 1992, the statute for criminal offenses has been eliminated. There is no more, as long as that act took place after 1992. You cannot go back prior to that because it deals with criminal activity. Civilly in New Jersey, the statute of limitations for a minor who is abused is only 2 years from the age of 18 or the age of 20. Now, we know in most cases children will not come forward for many, many years, if ever.
May not even recognize
Right.
it as sexual abuse.
Yeah, they absolutely don't. I mean, they will, as we discussed earlier, if you're asked, they'll tell you, I wasn't abused. No, I'm not a victim. And they don't make that connection with all the repercussions in their life. They just haven't connected those dots. Now, the law in 1992 changed, so when they make that connection, there is some recourse. Some, I tell you, because now that victim has to go through a grueling process called the Lopez hearing, which then shows or should prove to the court that the statute should be told or extended. And very often, they do not succeed in getting beyond
And this is
that
in the
barrier.
civil.
Civil.
Okay.
Strictly civil.
But is it considered criminal to sexually abuse a child?
Without a doubt, sure it is. So, in the state of New Jersey, if the act occurred after 1992, you may actually be able to charge your offender, criminally charge them, put them in jail, okay, and then say if it's beyond the civil statute already, okay, you now have no civil recourse to recover anything from that predator for the harm or damage that was done to you. So that's completely backwards, because civilly, the burden of proof is much lower. You just need a preponderance of the evidence. So although you can meet the higher burden of proof and convict somebody who has sexually assaulted you, you may not be able to hold them responsible to you personally. And
So you're
it's just
in a
backwards.
doing battle now to change that.
Without a doubt. Actually, this Thursday, there's a hearing in the Judiciary Committee. It's just the first step. There's a bill before that committee, S2405, that would eliminate the statute of limitations for sexual assault crimes against children in a civil matter. And it expands the scope of those who could be held responsible slightly. And it's absolutely necessary. It's long overdue. And victims, it's so important that victims get to court
Yes.
and have their day. First of all, the burden is still on the victim to make his or her case.
Right.
And of course, the older it is, we know the more difficult that may be.
Yeah.
But we also know that the sexual abuse of a child is a lifelong sentence. The effects of that damage are always there.
Yes.
So,
Forever and ever.
So a psychologist or doctor could attest to those effects and acknowledge and affirm that somebody has been sexually abused. So in fact, there is evidence. Okay, let's put
Yes.
it that way. Difficult to ascertain, certainly possible.
Yeah.
And, you know, as our society matures, and Thomas Edison once said this, you know, our laws need to change and evolve as well.
Yes, of course.
So these laws came about many years ago before we ever even dealt with sexual abuse or sexual assault. We know it deeply, profoundly scars. It's the equivalent of soul murder. It's often described as, okay?
I've just been told that we have 1 minute left.
Yes.
So I want to give you an opportunity, like, what is it you need from the world at large, and what is it that people should reach out to you for?
Yes. Well, one, anyone who's been sexually abused or might need that help, we have monthly support group meetings in the state, and maybe we can set them up. Maybe we can direct them, help
And
them
it's all
find
confidential?
Sure, absolutely, absolutely is. Maybe we can help them find a counselor. There's websites for men who are abused, malesurvivor.org, 1 in 6. snapnetwork.org for those abused by clergy, where you can go online and find resources. Please go there. There's discussion boards and forums where you could log on anonymously and talk and deal with what you're dealing with and question and get help. And there's people on those websites 24/7 because there are people from all over the world, thousands. So there is help available. There's films, documentaries, all of that.
I think out of what you said also is, you know, particularly since you're trying to change laws, and a lot of people, you know, don't know about this, it's really start educating themselves. Log onto your website, read the material, so that they can start to be advocates as well.
Right. You must familiarize yourselves
Yeah.
with the laws. And if you're here in New Jersey, please, by all means, understand why we need to change the statute of limitations and take action. Call your assemblyman, your senator.
We're at the end. Thank you again so much. You'll have to come back again because
It would be my pleasure.
deserves a lot more attention.
Well, thank you, Natasha, for
Thank
the time. It's very important. I
My name is Natasha Sherman. Thank you for joining us.